This is Stephen.
And this is Tracey.
And this is the Just the Two of Us podcast.
Please follow our podcast on the following platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Podbean. Just search Just the Two of Us podcast. Follow us on social media. On Facebook, Just the Two of Us podcast. Or on Twitter, we can be found at JTTOU podcast. Or follow us individually. You can find Stephen at Nipsey, Nipsey, or follow Tracey at Trayrific, Trayrific.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
Hello.
Tracey?
Stephen.
Why do you always give these you always just give me these weird looks when I say your name?
You say it as if I don't know, as if you don't know me.
Tracy?
Tracy. I don't know. Like I just got here or something. Like I just walked in the room or something. Like I just walked in. I don't know.
Well, Tracy, do you know what this podcast is?
Yes.
What is it? No. That's not what it is.
What is
I know what you're about to say, but that's not what it is. Before we get to that, this is our 50th podcast.
Oh! I'm so confused.
I know. Our 50th podcast. We've been doing this for, I don't know how many years.
I don't know.
7 years, 6, 7
No,
years. I don't know.
We have 50 podcasts.
Yeah, we only have 50 podcasts. We haven't been that consistent with it. Podcasting is hard, people. And I appreciate and give props to everyone who made a career of it and do it as their source of income, because it's really tough to do. But we've done 50, which is kind of like an accomplishment, because there's a lot of podcasts where people get into it, they get so excited, and they do 1 or 2 episodes, and they completely disappear off of that. I've seen plenty of them. I see them all the time when I'm looking at podcasts to listen to. So we should give ourselves, a pat on the back for at least getting to 50, which is an accomplishment.
Pretty cool. I'm very proud of us.
Right.
It took us a while, but
it took us a while, but we
got
there. We did it, Joe.
Oh God! Ladies and gentlemen, he loves that.
You can't tell me "We Did It, Joe" ain't the greatest thing ever. She's like, "We did it, Joe." That's the best.
You make her sound so
she's so pained.
Exactly. That's perfect.
We did it, Joe.
Very happy, okay.
I know, but the way she said it was so funny. But now that we got that out the way, this podcast, what the topic is, what you were about to spoil before I had to cut you off. You ruined my big, 50th episode announcement. It's about what really grinds our gears.
What grinds my gears?
Exactly. And we're not talking about grinding our gears in the general sense of the world, regular stuff that happens to you on the day-to-day basis. Why do people send emails that say, "I hope this email finds you well," or
I love starting things
or
like that.
8 o'clock Zoom meetings, and then you're expected to have your camera on. Those really grind our gears in the real world, but we're talking about what grinds our gears in movies and television shows. And it's basically those things that you just really hate to see. It's you just find annoying when you watch a movie or television show. It's why do they do this? Why do they always do this?
Right.
And sometimes it could take away from the enjoyment of a show or film, and other times it's just a minor annoyance. But in any event, there's a lot of those things that happen.
Right.
And I mean, we'll just go through a few of ours, and maybe, for you guys, listening at home or in your car. Who am I kidding? You're at home. No one's going anywhere.
You're not in your car.
You're not in your car. You're sitting right there at home. Maybe you guys can follow along. Maybe you'll find some familiarity with some of these things, and you think, man, like, yeah, I hate that too. And we can all commiserate in our hate of these things because that's the American way. I mean, that's what we like to do. We're a country of haters. But anyway, and this, I don't know, this might be like the big joker, so I'm gonna just start from the top with my first one on my list is I really hate in like movies and television. Well, this is more specific to television shows though. I hate when television shows that aren't about families feel the need to add families for like the main characters. So I'm talking about shows where a lot of times where it's like a genre show, or maybe it could be something like a cop show where, you know, it's like a sci-fi thing and you have these like investigators doing something, or FBI agents, or you know, like secret agents or whatever, where they have to investigate a crime, or week to week they're solving some mystery, and then they have to like squeeze in like a family situation into like the characters, you know? It's like, it's almost as if they don't have enough stuff to talk about in the show that they have to add this like family element. Of course, like in real life, people have families, you know? Of course they have real families, and they have to deal with families when, you know, it balances home life with their families and their jobs and careers and stuff like that. But when we're talking about like TV shows, like we can suspend some disbelief, but we don't need to have families all up in the show. Like, and this really came to mind because more recently because of the show Manifest on NBC. We've been watching Manifest. This is the 3rd season. And if you don't know about Manifest, it's about like a bunch of people are flying on a plane back from Jamaica to New York, and the plane disappears and then reappears like 5 years later, and the people on the plane, no time has passed. They don't realize that it's been 5 years, and they get off the plane like everything's normal, and the rest of the world has moved on. It's kind of like, think of it like Endgame with the Avengers, where people disappeared for 5 years and then came back to exact moment where they disappeared. So in this show, it's kind of like a Lost type of show where they're trying to figure out the mysteries of why the plane disappeared and why they're having all these people who are on the plane have these visions. And it really involves, the main story is about this family, this father with his son who were on the plane, and then his daughter and his wife who weren't on that plane, and his sister, and all these people are trying to like, you know, work together to solve these mysteries. But then they have the family involved in stuff, and it's like, it's kind of like it's a mystery show, but it's also a little bit of like a thriller spy show where they're going into these dangerous situations to find information, and there's like shady government operatives and other bad guys trying to stop them or kill them or whatever it is. And then they have the family involved. They have like the son, and then they have like the daughter, and it's so weird because like they feel as like, because the daughter and the wife don't have these so-called visions that the main characters have. But they have to invent ways to keep them involved in the plot. Like, what is the daughter and the mother doing when the father is off running through the streets of New York trying to, you know, find information about why the plane disappeared? And it seems kind of silly, like, to force it. Like, that's like a thing that I really hate, because there's no reason to put that. Like, if you want to do shows like this, I mean, I feel like it's like with cop shows. Those cop shows try to force like a family situation. I'm like, you know what? Just makes the cops single, because there's nothing going to happen on the show like plot wise unless it's a family show about the family where it's going to be necessary to have the family involved, because it feels like you're just shoehorning them into the story. And then like when a family is there, like when a cop is like undercover for like 3 weeks and they don't show the family, it's like, what's up with this family?
Where's
like,
the family?
Because if you didn't bring them into the show in the first place, you would have to figure out ways to kind of keep them involved and not have the viewer question, well, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. Like, this guy's going around undercover for 3 weeks, and you know the family's just chilling at home or whatever. So that's like a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of shows like that. It seems like, especially with cop shows, they bring in a family and you don't really hear about them until
they need them for
surprise. The wife and kid has been kidnapped.
Right.
Like it's like the bad guy or whoever, the cop is dealing with. You usually kind of see it more, not just with regular cop shows, not like, well, I haven't watched Law and Order in so long, but like a more like a FBI based show where, the person is like, investigating something like deep, and they have to go deep cover or something like that. And it's like one kind of main person they've been hunting for a long time. So that sort of, what's another word for cop? I don't want to use those. I don't want to use because they're not
enforcement.
Cops. There we go. Law enforcement type show where, like they're, you've got somebody who's just, hunting someone specifically. And then that person, finds out, oh, this person's got a family. I'm going to kidnap their family. And that's the only time like you see the family like really involved in like the plot. And and then like after that, it's just over. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, like the family's just like a plot device for very specific like
for
plot points,
to create drama.
To create drama. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like families. I like families. I think that like families. I know you just say, oh my gosh, this guy's miserable. He just hates families. No, I just feel like there's certain shows where if it's going to be a certain kind of show where it's about, if it's like an action-oriented show or like a sci-fi show or more of a horror show, like even thriller.
Doctor shows really do that too.
Yeah.
Where the doctor or I think of Grey's Anatomy because I watched that the most, but they all kind of have at some point developed families and children have been had on the show. But these doctors are at the, hospital like practically 24/7, it seems, so it's like, well, when do you have time? I know they do make time, but it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's just kind of like there's nothing to do with the family. Like they don't have anything to, for the families to do.
And they have to like invent stuff to keep them. So like it'll be a situation where, okay, now one of the family members is like caught up in something, some crazy situation, and they get involved. Like, oh my gosh, it was my son Billy who was in that accident that, that happened down at the stadium, and now he's on the operating table. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to save Billy too.
Exactly.
They have to invent ways to get the family involved because there are moments where, like, yeah, they do want to show some family stuff, and it's like, but you can't show it all the time. So then you have to, like, the writers, I feel like, have to invent scenarios where you bring the family into the main, thrust of the show. And I just feel like most times it's not done well.
Right. It's just haphazard. It's very like it's very last minute. It's kind of lazy.
Right. Like one show I think that did do it well was The Unit that came on CBS a few years ago with Dennis Haysbert and Scott Foley, where the show was the premise of these like special unit like Army Rangers who they would go overseas and get engaged in these like operations, these clandestine operations, and then their wives, their families are back at home on the base. But that show did a good job of like showing the lives of the women on the base and making it just as intriguing or interesting as what was going on with the guys, going into some country, parachuting in and rescuing some hostages from some dictator or something like that. They really balanced that well. And also, I mean, in many of the same episodes, like, the husbands would be back home and then they'll have like family stuff going on at home on the base. They have discussions in certain situations with, living on the base. So it never really felt forced with the unit. But most shows aren't that good. Most shows will have like these like, a Navy SEAL type operation, but then like, they show the wife once in a while when it serves their purpose of having some kind of plot point come up. And it's kind of like 95% of the episode is about this guy running around shooting people. And then the 5% is like, Billy got a D on his homework exam. And then like, something stupid like that. So, so that to me, that's like a big like pet peeve of mine, which really grinds my gears with TV shows.
Well, I'm going to keep going with that aspect. slightly is something that you also brought up before, which I agree with, and that's kids doing stupid things in movies and TV shows, so that it can create, again, some sort of tension or some sort of drama. Again, we love children here. They are wonderful. But a lot of movies and TV shows tend to use usually an older child, maybe in the age of 10 to 13, definitely teenagers, but, maybe as young as 10. They use them to do, make the kid do something that will now create some sort of like super tense situation. I think you encountered this the most when you watched The Walking Dead.
Yes, ma'am.
So you can talk more about that. But we've all seen those shows where you see like the parents like, trying to, maybe the situation is like someone's broken into the house, right? And they're hiding, right? And this could be a movie or a TV show, whatever. And the parents like, okay, be quiet, telling the kid to be quiet. And for some reason, and this can vary. Sometimes the kid is listening and is scared, and then they accidentally make a noise. They sneeze or something like that. And you're just like, ugh! Like, of course the kid is going to sneeze, or something happens, or one of their toys makes a noise. But then you got, on the flip side, like, you've got that kid that's like, they're like, whatever about the situation. And they like say something loudly, but mom, what? And you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to, like, I can't think of an exact, situation, but you've all been there. You've all seen those types of movies where, the kid is asked to be quiet or to hide or to stay in their room or whatever it is. And for some reason, they just can't do that. They have to, like, somehow leave their room for whatever reason. Oh, but I left my snack downstairs, or I left Mr. Fuzzy downstairs. Right, now I gotta go run, and the parent, and the kid starts freaking out, and the parent's like, oh God, be quiet, someone's in the house, whatever. We've seen that, and I can't stand that. I just, like, can't.
Nah, I agree.
Stand that.
Like you mentioned, like The Walking Dead. Like, that was one of my biggest grind my gears about that show in the beginning. Yeah, you talked about that a lot. Was like Carl, and like Rick was always there, Carl. He was always yelling for Carl, because Carl was always like wandering off somewhere and like encountering zombies. And I'm like, yo, like, this kid is old enough that he should know better not to be just like wandering off.
Yeah, that's the worst when the kid is like clearly old enough.
Right, to know better. Like, this is a world where, at this point, this kid knows we are in the new world order of zombies everywhere. He's seen zombies eat people. He's seen, his father and the people he's with and his mother have to kill zombies with guns. Everyone's running around with guns and chopping off heads. So he knows this is a very, 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 very dangerous situation. Yet that kid was always just wandering off somewhere. I'm like, dude, like, if I was his age, I don't know how old he was supposed to be at the time, maybe like 10 or 11, who knows? But I'm like, if the zombie apocalypse, if the Z-Pac jumped off when I was 10 years old, I would be so freaking frightened that I would not go anywhere. I would not be more than 2 inches from my parents.
Right, exactly.
Like, there's literally zombies everywhere. I would be so frightened that I wouldn't go anywhere without my parents.
Exactly.
But yet this kid was always wandering around. And I'm like, this is so dumb.
They do that a lot in movies and shows. And again, it's just, to me, it's like, this is going to be another pet. This is actually a pet peeve of mine, so I can kind of just roll right into it. But and I don't know how to even phrase it, but it's obviously, like, bringing up The Walking Dead is a really good example, because it's not real. We hope that will never happen. But yeah, like, when you have these types of shows where it's clearly like, okay, an unrealistic situation, and yet the actions of the characters sometimes are very unrealistic. Like as you said, a child, I'm just going to go off and explore during this zombie apocalypse, and they're always able to just leave and no one knows that they've left. But anyway, it's my pet peeve is with, I guess, you know, people who make movies and TV shows. It's like the suspension of disbelief. Where do you draw that line? Where do you want us as the audience to?
How much do you want us to suspend?
How do you want us to? Exactly. It's like very hard to explain. I just, you just know it when you see it in a movie. Like maybe you're watching something very dramatic, you know, like a just flat out drama, and yet something happens. And to me, I find this more so in dialogue than anything else. I guess my biggest pet peeve with a lot of things is dialogue and like the writing. But like, yeah, it's that suspension of disbelief and like the line, like how far do you want us to go here? Are we really supposed to believe that, you know, I'm just going to keep using an example because it's a good example of like a child just wandering off, or like even like in the other example I said, like, you know, a kid freaking out that they've left their favorite stuffed animal downstairs while there's like an obvious like person trying to hunt them down. And this is, and I say it in the scenario of the, like, maybe it's a mom and a child at home, or maybe it's a whole family at home, and they literally see like people breaking into their house and they run upstairs. You know what I mean? They see it. It's not like they were upstairs and like the mom or dad heard something downstairs, so they get, you know, you didn't see anything. No, like obvious situation where it's like, oh my God, someone's trying to break in our house and get us, and they're coming and we see them, and you run to the basement and you hide or something. But yet the kid is like, but Mr. Snuggles is upstairs by himself. Like, kid, it's like that kind of like writing that just wouldn't happen. Like, I would hope it would not happen. It just is so unrealistic. But like, you see that a lot in terms of, you know,
that's like a subset of like my other very specific grind my gear thing of stupid characters. Generally in movies and television shows. Like I understand, like, if you know, if we watch stuff like I said, action movies or thrillers or things like that, people are under high stress and they might make mistakes and do you know, make decisions that aren't smart, which, you know, is natural, and I can accept that for the most part. But I hate when, like, because I think in moments of stress, people can like do stupid things and make a stupid decision. I hate it when it reaches the point of the character is just being just completely stupid, just like a completely dumb character who like is doing something that no one in real life would do, no reasonable person would do in real life, even given like the stressful circumstances that they find themselves in. And I hate, because I think a lot of writers do that, where they make the character just so stupid that it's like always just doing something very stupid in order to like advance, like, you know, the plot. Like basically the only reason that this person did this extraordinarily stupid thing was because we needed to advance this plot. Like we needed to get from this plot point to this plot point, or we needed this action to happen in this series or film, because we wanted to get here. It's basically the writers like came up with an idea like, I want to get from A to Z. How do I get to A to Z? Well, I have to have this happen, this happen, this happen, so I can get to Z. So in order to make this happen, like, I'm going to have my character do something extremely stupid because I am married to the idea of getting to this point Z. And those, like, that really I really hate that. Like, I'm not a writer, and I keep thinking, if I were to ever become a writer, like if I was ever someone who would like write a script or a screenplay, I always had in the back of my head, like, I would have these certain rules that I would abide by. And one of them was like, you know, don't write stupid characters. You can write flawed characters. You can write characters who make mistakes. But you don't write a character that's stupid, especially a character whose stupidity is necessary just to like advance whatever, you know, narrative you're trying to tell. Like, and I really, really like dislike that.
Trying to think of an example. Do you have an example
of a
stupid character? I can't think of anything. Like, it's kind of hard to take. Like, I know exactly what you mean because we've obviously talked about this when we've been watching certain things. It's hard to think of an example because this happens in TV shows, movies. It happens like all the time. Maybe more so in like like maybe action, like thriller movie.
Yeah, I think it would happen more and stuff like that. Like
where there's something really tense, yeah,
anything like an action related show or like a sci-fi show.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't think of any like specific examples like right now, but yeah, definitely those types of, because those are like high level, high stress, situations that aren't even reasonably close to being like realistic, to be quite honest.
And this is not an example of it at all, but I just started thinking about this as you were saying it, but it might be the other side of the coin of what you're saying, when this happens a lot in horror movies where somebody hears something in the basement and it's like, you're gonna go down and see what it is. It's like, no. Like obvious.
No, it's not even. No, this is what it is. Like the person hearing something in the basement and going downstairs is not the problem of like them being stupid.
Okay.
Like, you hear something in the basement, you might be like, okay, what's going on? This rises to the level of just being an completely obtuse, stupid person is if they go into the basement and they don't turn on the light.
Oh, right. That's perfect.
Who does that?
Okay, who go? Like, you just go into the dark basement.
You just go into the dark basement. Like, there's nothing wrong with the light switch. The light switch works.
Right.
Okay, it's fine. You hit the switch, boom, light. It's only because, like, you need something as a writer to, like, advance this plot point. So it has to be completely dark because the character decides not to turn on the light, and then they go downstairs, and then that's the opportunity for the visual effects folks to do like a little scary, like, pop up of a ghost or something.
Monster.
Exactly. Whatever. I'm like, no, like no one in real life would do that. Someone in real life would turn on the light before they go into the basement.
Right.
Even if they didn't hear a loud, like a strange sound, they probably still most likely would just turn on the light. They go into the basement.
Yeah, you see that all the time. Oh, the heat's not working. Can you go downstairs and see what's going on with the furnace?
Right.
So they go down in the completely dark, they like maybe they have a flashlight, maybe, but it's just so funny. Like that happens so much. Like going into dark basements. Like why?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't have a horror film in the light, Stephen.
Right, but that's my point. Like as writers take the lazy way out. Like they just have like a character do something completely stupid or even out of character for like a reasonable person. It's like, well, I'm just gonna go down here where I'll turn on the light. Like you could still set it up so that like, a situation where there is no light in order to get to the scary stuff happening. Wow. They turn on the light, and then we've seen this before in movies, but they turn on the light and it blows a fuse.
Oh yeah.
But then they have to go downstairs, but that makes more sense.
That makes more sense.
They'll go downstairs and like, oh, let me fix the fuse box, or do something, trip the circuit breaker because I blew a fuse, or the light bulb blew, or maybe there's an actual like block-wide power outage or something.
So it has to be something.
So I just gave you 3 examples of how you can get the person into the basement in the dark.
Right.
But they don't want to do that. They just want the person to be a complete idiot and just go to the basement without turning on the light at all.
Exactly. Yeah, that you see that kind of stuff. Different variations of that happen in a lot of movies. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, like I was talking about like the suspension of disbelief, but like I mean, I was trying to think of an example of that, but it just happens a lot in movies where I think they're trying to have some realism, but then they have like kind of like unrealistic dialogue or the character saying something or doing something that just doesn't like flow, and you may have the opposite of it, like maybe in some fantasy or sci-fi movies where obviously like you got to suspend your disbelief, but there might be something that happens that just seems like, well, that would just never happen. And I usually don't feel that. I'm more on the opposite. I'm more like, it kind of annoys me when it's like a a movie like based in reality in today's current time, and and it's usually like more of a drama or just a serious movie or whatever. And something happens or somebody says something and it's just not like very realistic. I can't think of an example for that, but yeah, it's just sometimes I feel like movies and even some TV shows just kind of like, well, how. I just thought of a situation where a lot of people talked about this in terms of TV and two shows, Sex and the City. It could be any show actually in New York. Sex and the City, Friends. The unrealistic apartment situations. Like, this is a really small detail. It's a really small thing about, suspension of disbelief.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of people hated like how big the apartment was in Friends, as well as Sex and the City, Sarah Jessica Parker, Carrie's apartment. Like, everybody just thought there's no way like these people could afford these apartments, especially Carrie, because she was like a writer. Like, I didn't watch Friends enough, so I don't know what, I know Monica and what's her face? I can't even think of Jennifer Aniston. No, it's Jennifer Aniston's character's name. Rachel. I know they shared an apartment, so that might make more sense, but their apartment was still huge. And, but yes, Carrie's apartment in Sex and the City was, everyone used to say, like, it was just so unrealistic on, like, this column. She wrote a column, and it's just like, how is she affording this? But I believe there's an episode that talked about that her apartment was rent stabilized, and she only paid like a couple $100 for her apartment.
Well, that's the explanation.
I believe, but I feel like, that was like first season, and like, after 6 seasons or whatever, people forgot. But people used to talk about that stuff. But that's one of those things that it's not exactly what I want to bring up, but like, I just remember that's kind of like one of those things that it's like, why not have them in a more realistic apartment? Like, maybe even you can say that for Seinfeld too. Like, do you think he had like a realistic apartment?
Yeah, he had a 1-bedroom apartment. Yeah, it was pretty small. It wasn't like,
you didn't think it was too big.
No,
for him on a comedian salary, or what? That's what he was supposed to be, right?
Yeah, but no, not in the least. Not for Seinfeld. Like, it was a 1-bedroom apartment. He had like a little bathroom there, kitchen, living. Like, he didn't have like a small kitchen, small like little table that you could sit at and eat with the couch and it was even like on a comedian salary. Like, because he was never a quote unquote struggling comedian in the context of the show. Okay, like, he was always working. He wasn't like,
I didn't know if he was supposed to be like, though. Even though he's always working, it doesn't mean he made good money.
But it was never presented as like, oh wow, he's like a struggling comedian and no one knows who he is and he's trying to make his way in the world. Like, no, he was a comedian who worked constantly. I mean, it elevated to the point where like he got the chance to be, get his own TV show on NBC and things like that. But from the moment the show started, he was always, working. Now, if you want to talk about like location, because like they weren't quite, it wasn't quite sure like or explained where he lived that I know of. So if you want to delve deeper into that, you could be like, well, how did he live on the Upper West Side? Did he make that much money? I mean, who knows?
Yeah. See, that's the same thing with Carrie in Sex and the City too, where she lived. I think it was somewhere on the East Side, or like, it was obviously like a really nice neighborhood because they would show the front, of her building and stuff.
Yeah. Well, but in the case of Seinfeld, like, but it looked like he lived in like a normal building though. Like, it was like just a regular apartment building, like, because you see from his neighbors, all his neighbors were just like regular people, Right. He had a mailman neighbor, and then he had like a horse-faced doofus who lived across the street who didn't work at all, and you had just various people throughout the run of the show. So I don't think that was unrealistic at all.
Sorry for that tangent, but anyway, I was trying to think of some examples of like, just like. And there's varying degrees of it, I should say. Like, very varying degrees of like, okay, this person lives in New York, but they don't make much money, but they have this fabulous apartment somehow, like that sort of thing, and I'm always like, okay, well, how, where are we supposed to be as as the viewer? Like, are we supposed to really suspend our disbelief here? Are we not? Like, what are we supposed to call out as, okay, that's just not, real. Although obviously we know TV or this is a movie and it's fake. You know what I mean? It's like just I go back and forth with that as with my pet peeves. Mm-hmm. You can go next if you like.
Well, I don't want to be. I don't want to
Debbie Downer. No.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer and bring it up again. But I'm gonna pivot back to families. Uh-huh. And one thing I really think is tired and played is parents in shows that have terrible relationships with their children.
Oh, like yeah, that's
it's always common. Like the rebellious teenager who's always like mad at the father because he divorced the mother. They're always like into like drugs or drinking. Like they never listen to the parents, and they're just like a problem. And then always like arguing. Like every show is like that. Like especially like because we tend to watch, like I said, genre shows. So we tend to watch stuff that's like a sci-fi show or a thriller, action thriller, a spy show, or shows like that. So it's always like a situation where if there's a family involved, it's always like a fraught, tense relationship between the parents and the kid. The kid never listens, a teenager or 13, 14, or whatever it might be. And I'm like, this is just so played out. And it just makes me think, like, how many, like, television writers has had terrible relationships with their family?
Right.
Because it's a trope that's trotted out there all too often. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying, like, you're supposed to show happy families or a great relationship between parents and their children, but I feel like it's disproportionately depicted as like this really, really, really tough or really, really, difficult relationship between the parents and the kid. And I'm like, this is like lame. Like, why do you even do this? Like,
because it's usually very like there's always it's mostly tense, which that can go with my argument of like the suspension of disbelief. Like, are we supposed to believe that these relationships are just always just, I don't know, tense, and teens are always just angsty and just don't listen to their parents? And I mean, obviously that happens. So there is some realism there, sure. I
think there's realism, like there'll be specific situations where there's like, there's an argument between a kid and a parent or whatever. Right. That happens. But I think of like there's too many shows where they rely on that being like, this is like, part of the show. Like they just like are always butting heads, and it's always, this tense, like tense relationship, and it's always like just the kid is just being like a complete like a-hole, and it's like, most kids aren't really like that, what I'm saying? Like maybe it's their way of like, well, we have to create drama somehow. But I think about, that's what it is. Because this is my jam. It's been my jam since '93. I watch it all the time on television. It's like Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And I think about the relationship between Benjamin Sisko, and his son, Jake, how, like, that was, like, a great depiction. It was the best depiction of probably, like, a black father and son relationship in the history of television. I mean, besides it being, like, a great depiction of that relationship, it's also, like, a great depiction of, like, there were times where the kid, like, he acted like a brat, or, he disagreed with his father. But it was always clear that, like, they loved each other. It was always clear. And he wasn't, like, a terrible brat where he was always being an a-hole to his dad and just doing angsty, stupid things. Mouthing off and stuff. Like, that never happened on the show.
That's huge amongst TV shows and movies where the kid is, like, completely mouthing off, going back. I'm like...
Right, exactly. Like that's something that happens all too much, and like it didn't happen like Deep Space Nine. Like it was like, and they were able to involve the kid and have drama and situations with his father and with the show as a whole, and create some tension and drama without going there. Like he was able to put him in situations of his him maturing as a man and growing up and interpersonal relationships and relationships with his father and his friend. And female companionship or whatever, they were able to create that conflict and impart some drama without it being like, well, he's just going to be an angsty, mouthy a-hole of a kid. And I just use it as an example of like it can be done. I just feel like there's too many shows that don't even bother, and that's why I wonder, is it really a situation where these writers like just had either terrible relationships with their parents or they have terrible relationships with their kids?
The realist, the I guess what they're trying to present, is that parenting is hard and kids growing up is hard and kids are going through changes and parents, have to deal with that. Kids have to, deal with, their changes in their bodies and all this stuff and things like that. And and so that is fine to present that in TV, movies, whatever. That there's obviously going to be conflict at times, and and to show this character, the parent, the character, like usually the main character, like just having a lot on their plate, because usually it's like this person, mom or dad, both is going through a lot at work. They just got stuff going on personally, particularly maybe if it's like a single mom or single dad, whatever, like they are trying to navigate the, romantic life. And then they got this kid. So yeah, showing like all the different aspects of life is fine and real. But yeah, when it comes specifically to the kid, it just like, it just gets overdone so much where the kid is just constantly like almost egregiously like obnoxious and like an a-hole. And it's just like, why isn't your kid nice ever?
It's like over relied upon by writers.
Yeah,
it's like they don't know how to write.
Yeah.
They don't know how to write full, I guess, fully formed relationships, between parents and children. Like they a well-rounded relationship that has its ups and downs and turns. Like I think they're completely incapable of writing those types of relationships. So their fallback is like, we're just going to make the kid angsty and an a-hole. Yeah. And then, we'll figure out then how the parent can connect with the kid and figure the situation out.
I will say that I watched This Is Us. I haven't been watching this current season because I just haven't had the mental capacity to watch that show right now, given the pandemic and everything. Like, it's a lot. I mean, if anybody out there watches This Is Us, it's a lot. It's a kind of a heavy show. And not a lot of happy things happen on that show. Sometimes I'm like, why do I watch the show? It's so sad. But I think they've done a good job with the kids on the show and the parents, only because you see the show takes place over various points in the kids are adults in the current time. They're like 39 years old, but they go back in time and they switch back and forth through various points of their lives from the time they were babies, toddlers to like 8 years old. Then they get into when they're, I don't know if there's in between like a 12, 13, but definitely like high school age. So you see like all stages. And one of the things I was just thinking about as you were saying is that like the one character, Kevin, like his character probably is the typical kid that you see on TV, like very kind of angsty and a little bit, I don't want to say obnoxious, although he can be, but like he's that typical character. But what's nice is that the other two, Randall and Kate, they kind of reflect more of like real, like through their whole span that you see them, like real kids, I guess you could just say, like it's more real, especially with Kate, because she definitely goes back and forth between like when she was little or just younger, like when they show her at 8, she's really like just like nice, but a little insecure because she's, she's a little heavier, and you see that relationship with her and her mom, because the mom obviously, just feels like, oh, she's sad and whatever because she, she doesn't look like the other girls. All the other her friends are skinny and all this stuff. So you can tell like they're working through. You see them working through that, but at that age, she just is so like, I don't know. She's just, there's a sweetness about her that I haven't seen with kids on a TV show in a long time. But then it changes as she gets to be a teenager. And then she gets a little bit more like angsty and stuff. And I think that is real. And then obviously as an adult, Kate is like, she's going back and forth. Like she's sweet, she's nice, and they have like a decent relationship, but they're working through things. So I think only because of that show, the nature of that show, that they show all these different stages, that they actually can,
they can form a real kind of like, and the show is obviously about their family, like you can see kind of all these different points and transitions, but a lot of shows just, it's like if they have a family on the show, they're just second fiddle, third fiddle even sometimes to like the main point of the show. And so you just don't, all you get are these bits and pieces. Like, again, you get that angsty teen and, all of that and it just doesn't help the show. Like, I often wonder why they do that, because you're not going to do anything with this kid. Or kids.
Which goes to my earlier point of like, why are you including the family in this in the first place? They're not contributing to this story. It's like, if you have a story like a show, I use it as an example, like with something like, let's think about like the X-Files. Mm-hmm. So the X-Files, you have Scully and you have Mulder, and then they're FBI agents, and every week is Monster of the Week. They're going and, they find, they're investigating a werewolf sighting in Portland, and then they're going to investigate some alien abductions in Iowa, whatever it is. It's something different. But the show really, for the most part, kept the focus on them. It wasn't like Scully had a husband and a kid at home. Mm-hmm. Mulder wasn't a divorced man with like 2 kids living with his ex-wife. Mm-hmm. They didn't include all that stuff because that's just silly. Like, of course, in real life, those people might have like brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and family members, but this isn't real life. This is a TV show. Like, get to the heart of it. The heart of the show is about 2 FBI agents who are investigating all this strange phenomenon that happens all over the country, and that's the premise of the show. Like, you don't need to like force this family situation in there, because then if you force the family situation in there, then you'll be forced to write for the family. You have to figure out a way to keep them involved in the show, but then, like you said, like then you have to include kids, and then it's like, okay, what am I going to do with this kid? Well, the kid is going to have to be angsty and angry all the time at his dad for going across the country to investigate these sightings of Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, and then you have to write that, and then you're not doing a good job. And it's like, no, just cut all that out. Like, only include the necessities of what you need for this character and what you need for this show.
Yeah. Well, let's go away from kids and families, because we probably beat that horse.
Look, the people need to know. And like, I feel as though I'm doing a public service here. I am doing a public service where I'm bringing to light some of these issues. And I think people listening are going to be like, you know what? Stephen has a point. Like, why do they keep having these shows with all these families?
We're moving on.
I'm just saying.
We're moving on. Let's talk about flashbacks, because I can't stand them.
Okay, go ahead.
That's all I have to say. I just hate flashbacks in anything. I'm not, because I feel like they're just not done well. I'm just kind of like, just put it in the show. Just put it in the movie as is. Like, start, something also that I kind of like thought about too was movies that start at the ending and then they work their way to the beginning.
Right, the time shift.
Oh God, I don't hate it. It's not a peeve, because I actually don't see too many films that do that. But sometimes I'm just kind of like, why can't we just start from the beginning?
It happens in TV shows more than films, but see, that's my biggest thing.
You think so? It happens in TV more than films?
Yeah, like starting at the beginning, like starting at the
end.
Well, like,
like really, like you see the end of the movie. That's what I mean. Because I feel like that's a movie thing. I don't know what TV shows.
Well, here, let me put it like this: the biggest, I guess, perpetrator of this, I would say perpetrator because it seems like it's a crime to entertainment, would be J.J. Abrams. Okay. Like, he loves doing that and his stuff. Like, he did it in like Alias, where, basically they'll show like I guess the famous episode may have been like the Super Bowl episode of Alias, where like Sydney Bristow's like on the plane, and then she's like, has this like sexy flight attendant outfit on, I think, and then like, then she starts beating up a dude on the plane, and then like, I guess maybe like she jumps off the plane and explodes or something like that, like with a parachute, and then this like 24 hours earlier. And then we go back to like, how we got to that point.
I see what you're saying.
That's what I'm talking about.
Because I'm thinking of the whole show. I'm thinking of the whole run of a show. Like where they start the first season. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why. Like in my head, when you said that, I was thinking, I've never seen a show start at the ending and then work their way through seasons going to the beginning.
Yeah, where they show something and then they'd be like, well, let's jump back to how we got here 2 days before.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. No, that totally happens. But
what do you mean?
Well, no, I meant that, like what you said in terms of an episode. I wasn't thinking of it as an episode because, that does totally happen. I was thinking of it as an entire show is built off of, like, the first season is basically, like, even the first episode of the first season is like, this is what happened at the end of whatever. It's just the ending, and then now we're going to work our way to the, like, how we got here through the whole run of the show. Like, that's what I meant. That's what I was thinking that you meant. But no, I was, that... But even still, with TV shows, I don't know, that doesn't happen a lot these days. I feel that was like an old thing.
I think in the
90s.
It depends on the show. But what you said just reminded me of another show that does something similar is like Titans it's on HBO Max now, but it was on DC, where it's like, like the younger, like superheroes, like Robin and Wonder Girl and all these other folks, where like that show is it's like one of those shows where, every episode is, there's the main point or plot of that particular episode or story, but then like throughout the episode they do like flashbacks to like, how Robin, decided to like leave Batman, or then how, what happened when he first, met Wonder Girl, or it's all these like the entire first 2 seasons of that show, like every episode was like, okay, we're gonna do flashbacks like throughout with each episode, and that's like annoying. Like, that's like, dude, like I came to watch the present show. Like I came to watch the story you're telling now. You don't need to use every episode to like flash back to well, this is when he first met Hawkman or whatever his name is. I don't even know that show or whatever. And this is what happened the last time he fought this villain. And they do that all the time.
Yeah, there's a level. The flashbacks are just sometimes just too egregious to me. Like they're just too much. That's my word for the day. Egregious. They're just too much. They're too long, and I feel like they're just never well done. Now, I could argue that This Is Us is a huge flashback, but the way they do it, it doesn't make me feel like it's a flashback at all. Like they literally are kind of almost feels like parallel universes. Like they're running all these different parts of their lives like simultaneously. So yeah, but people can fight me and if they want to about it, because you can definitely say it's flashbacks if you want. But no, I generally don't like flashbacks. But here's the funny thing. On the flip side, which is something that I've heard people don't like, which I can see why, but I kind of like it, is exposition. I know a lot of people don't like when there's this huge explanation dump of...
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the info dumps. Like
info dump, yeah.
If you're a skilled writer, you're able to get that information out without having a character sit there and speak a soliloquy.
It's always like backstory
about what happened. There's ways that you could do it. Like you don't have to have characters say to each other, it's like, yeah, man, it's like, back, he used to be the biggest, villain in the city, and I fought him, and then because of this, I lost my hand in the battle, and I don't need like those like long like explanations of info dumps of like what's going on. Like you should be able to.
You want to show, don't tell.
Yeah, exactly. So you can skillfully get that information out for the viewer without going that route.
For some reason, both are the same, really, flashbacks or info dumps, right? It's this telling of the story that's not in the story, right? It's kind of like...
Yeah, exactly.
Just put it in the story. For some reason, though, I just don't like the flashbacks. I don't mind a character just telling me something. Now, I do, again, there are some that is just way too much talking. Like, I agree with that. There are some that are way too much talking. But I don't mind a little... I don't mind when two characters are sitting it just has to make sense. It has to be in rhythm, if that makes any sense. Like it just has to be in the flow of the story,
right?
Of the whole storyline where you've got two characters sitting there. Well, no, I can't say it because it might give. It's a Falcon and Winter Soldier reference, but I won't. It just has to make sense where two people are sitting and literally having a conversation, and you get that backstory, which is where I feel like it's very natural because these people are talking anyway, and they maybe we're talking about something like presently, and the other person is like, well, this is what happened to me. Not even saying it like that. It just flows. It has to flow correctly. Yeah. And a lot of times I understand that it doesn't. It just comes out of nowhere and this person just drops all this information.
I just think it's I think the common theme is like you just have to have like good skilled writers who can get this information out.
Yeah.
Without it being so like awkward and ham-handed or like force-fed or forced into the situation. But like one show that did do flashbacks well, because that was kind of like the premise of it, is like Lost. Like the way Lost was set up, it was designed, the way the show was structured was the people were lost on the island, but then, they kept showing like flashbacks to their life before the island. So how they became who they became in a sense, how their personalities and who they were informed, and what happened before they got on the plane, what happened while they were on the plane, things like that. And it was done very, very, very well with Lost.
Yeah.
And I think also the problem with Lost, the way the show was, it was so successful of a show, then everyone else tried to copy it. So they tried to copy the whole thing with Lost. They copy like the flashbacks. Like that's something like Manifest also does with these flashbacks. They copied it with the mystery of all these, these distinct, disparate people who have no connection are all connected by this weird, crazy phenomenon, and then they, have their lives are brought together, and that's something else that's like, that they kind of took from Lost, and like because of Lost, you have shows that try to do that. So it comes to all these flashbacks and stuff that we complain about. It's like, stop trying to be like Lost. Like Lost was Lost.
Stop trying to do that. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say about that. Did you have anything else to say?
Not about that, but I'll tell you one thing I don't like.
Yep.
And this might seem like, then you may be like, well, Stephen, why does this matter to you? Why don't you care about it? Yeah, because it does, okay? And I don't like weird characters in shows or movies. I don't
explain weird though.
I don't like weird characters who are weird just for the sake of being weird. Like when a writer thinks that's character development, it's like they have a guy who just likes to act weird. Like what if it's like an office situation where let's say like it's a cop show and the medical examiner, and the medical examiner is someone who's like, he always like, walks around and he just like always keeps marshmallows in his lab coat.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
And would eat a marshmallow, and then like he'll like he'll talk to like the cops and explain what the cause of death was for this particular victim, and then he'll be like really weird and odd and eccentric, and like, and they'll just say like odd things, and I feel like no, why are you doing this? Like, why are you just creating a weird person just for the sake of being weird? Like, this doesn't advance the plot any. It doesn't make the show more enjoyable to watch. It's not character development for that particular character. It's just like they're just a weird person for this situation. Yeah. And it's like, come on, people. We all know weird people in like, real life and in certain ways and how they might speak or interact, but they're disproportionately represented in shows and in important positions in shows too. It's always like a weird like medical examiner.
I was just gonna say that is like the key character that they use to make quirky, weird, odd behavior. Like, is it because they hang around dead bodies all the time?
Well, they must like it, so they must be a weirdo,
Weird, like, yeah, that is the guy. Now, every now and then, like, I think you can see on whatchamacallit, on CSI?
Sure, CSI.
Yeah, they are always cool. Their medical examiners were always cool.
But you understand like where I'm getting at. It always seems like it's a character like that. Shows that's going to be like a weird person, and that's just an example of like I just hate when you just make characters weird just for the sake of being weird. Like no, like this is. If
dumb. You're not going to make a Kramer, don't make him at all. Because I felt like Kramer, it was just right.
Right, but also it's also a comedy as well. So his character is going to be goofy and like have these weird things about him and things that he likes and says crazy things because it's a comedy too. So that's kind of like
it works.
It works because every comedy is always going to be like kind of like a weird goofy character. But
then you can ask yourself, why do we always need a weird goofy character on a comedy? It's already a comedy.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's another thing.
That might be overdone too, actually.
That might be overdone as well. It's like, we gotta have that one character who was just like just super, super weird. Like kind of like how Winston was on New Girl, where for the first like 4 seasons. First 4 seasons, the writers were struggling to figure out a personality for him. Like
so they give him a cat.
What are we going to do with Winston? We just keep coming up with crazy because we don't know what to do with this character. Every other character was set and how their personalities were going to be, and we knew what kind of person they were going to be. But Winston, they didn't know what to do. They kept going from here to there. And they went to a point where he became like a prankster, and him and Cece would do pranks, and like it was always a Winston and Cece mess around. Right. And then they had him like with the cat Ferguson, where he was just being weird, really weird with this cat. Yeah. Like he dresses up the cat, and it's like me and Ferguson are going to the club to get women. Like okay, that's just weird. Like that's just
the funny thing about that show too. Just on a small tangent was that like Damon Wayans was supposed to. Damon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Junior.
Well, Junior. Right. Okay. I was like, yeah, it's Junior. Damon Wayans Jr. was supposed to be that character, and that makes me wonder, like, what did they have planned for him?
Well, like, he wasn't going to be that character. Like, they changed the character. So, Damon Wayans Jr. was going to be coach. So, he's going to be like a former
that was going to be
basketball player.
He did come on to the show later. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he was Winston. His name was Winston, but he's going to be a former basketball player.
Makes me wonder why they didn't just, like...
Because maybe they didn't think Lamorne Morris was going to be convincing as like a former basketball player who was kind of like cocky.
Yeah, he was short.
Right, a little shorter, a little more slender build.
But they just basically didn't even come up with anything for him.
Exactly.
Like nothing.
They had nothing.
Nothing.
Like not till the end.
Well, he ended up becoming a cop, right?
Yeah, but that's when they kind of like settled on what he's going to be. Like, okay, he's going to be kind of like this cop, but he's going to be also kind of weird with this cat. But before then, they really didn't know. Like, they just kept changing his personality on what he was, and it was a shame. It was like, come on, man, like pick something for him and stick with it. Don't have him being weird just for the sake of being weird.
Yeah. Weird. Okay. I have a whole bunch of little small things that I can just run through, and you can just talk about them if you like. So it's just going to be a little barrage because what's the time?
Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I hit you with my last one.
We've been going off on tangents. We're sorry. Okay. So these are small things. They happen in movies and or TV. Just little things that I get annoyed with, and maybe you do too. I hate bullies and stuff. Bullies are so weird, and I don't know. It's all like. It's like the same thing. It's the typical, taller, oversized child for his age. Usually it's a he, and got to pick on the like smaller child. And it happens with, girls too. It's usually the girl who's with the mean girl crew. And I don't know. I'm just sick of seeing bullies in TV shows. I mean, I know it's like a real life thing that can happen, but I'm just like, the way they depict them, that's what I'm tired of, because it's the same over and over again. They're in class, they're walking down the hall, they slam the locker, stuff a kid in a lock. I'm just over that. Okay, moving on. This is real small. This happens probably mainly in movies, but can happen in TV. But people driving, you're in a car, you're driving, and the driver keeps looking over at the passenger like for far too long. And it's like so annoying, and I can't believe they still do that, because I'm just like, You're driving.
But that, to me, that's not even like a problem with the writing. It's really a problem with like the actor, like not knowing like.
What's the problem? I'm just.
Yeah.
No, you don't get to cut in right now. I'm just trying to run through these. Cut in at the end. I'm sorry. Now he's sad. I'm trying to just go through them.
Go through it then. Go. Keep going.
So that is a peeve. Okay, this is a big one. So someone explaining something or trying to explain something to somebody else, but they keep getting interrupted and they can't explain the thing that's going to save. Let's say we have person A, person B. Person A is trying to like hurry in and explain something to person B. Person A is like, I gotta tell you something. Oh my God, like you'll never believe. And then like person B starts talking and they won't let person A get a word in. And then person B is like, okay, bye, I gotta go. And then the person A, for some reason, can't stop person B from leaving to tell them this really important information that could either stop them from being embarrassed or stop them from being in danger. I don't understand why that happens all the time, but it's very, very annoying when person B is that person that always interrupts and they want to like, oh, we had, whatever. They always have something to say that seems to be more pressing and they won't let person A get in a word. And that is so annoying. Okay, moving on. I hate when, usually this is in action films, when characters, usually, the action hero, the man, he saves the woman, and then like they have to kiss in this like really, really dramatic situation, like really tense, really scary. Like there's always that stop of, they're just like, oh my God, thank you for saving me type of, energy. And they have to like kiss while like the building is falling down or whatever. Or they're like, I don't know, like hanging from a building or something. Just, I don't know. I just hate that. Okay, in TV shows specifically, and these are like cop shows. I don't like when we talk about this all the time when you got two cops partners and they need to go investigate something, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go investigate, and one of those people, usually it's like it happens both ways. They need to go investigate something where they definitely need backup, but do they ever call the backup? No. They just go investigate. Or you have a situation where you've got two, partners, and this is a situation where it might be somebody is like personally invested in this for some reason, and they're like, okay, well, we need to go investigate. I'm gonna go investigate. No, we need backup. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you're right. We're gonna wait about it. We're gonna wait for backup, but they don't. The person, who's like really invested in this, who has some sort of personal connection to this, whatever is going on, this investigation, they go and investigate alone. Like, why does that always happen? Why is it always one cop going to investigate something? And it's like, this is going to be like a highly dangerous situation, usually with like a whole bunch of people with guns, and like, it's just one person going to investigate. I hate that. Back to the personal story or the personal like connection. Why is it always, I hate this, in cop shows, you got the one cop, something happens to like maybe a family member or to a friend or something, and it happens to be some like person that got away, and so now they have this personal connection to this, to this crime or to this murder or whatever. Their boss is like, no, I need to take you off this case because like you have a personal connection. And then of course, what happens? That cop isn't gonna like
be objective,
just sit down and just stay at home while the police, the rest of the police like take care of it. No, they're gonna like be at home. They're gonna sneak into the precinct and get on the computer and find information. They're gonna do their own investigation on the side. They're gonna go and like hunt down this person. Hey, that happens way too much. And that's it. So that was my barrage.
Well, thanks for the barrage. Like what you said also reminded me of, like, I hate situations where in a show, like, or a movie where someone has to, like, if the people just had a conversation, if the person just told the other person this important information,
yeah,
you could have like saved a bunch of time. It's like, hey, if you would have just told him that, his father is at the door, like it just, I don't know, it's just like they just basically they just never like sit down and have a conversation like real normal people would, and then it just like, okay, prolongs the situation. Like, okay, now we just added 30 minutes to the movie because that person didn't just sit down and explain something. But my big thing is that I'm going to wrap it up on is because as I mentioned before, these genre shows and things like that. I like, that's my wheelhouse. I like action stuff, I like sci-fi, I like thrillers, and invariably in these things, there's always like a bad guy or bad woman who's the villain. Yeah. I hate the overused trope of, you think about like spy movies in particular, maybe, where the villain is always like the most like educated, knowledgeable like person in the world, where the villain like can start, quoting classical works of like Plato and Plato and like all these philosophers, or like Shakespeare, like they know a sonnet from one of these Shakespeare plays, and then they're able to like reel off those quotes to like to the good guy, like they have the good guy tied up, and then they'll say in Shakespeare's sonnet of Macbeth in the third act and fourth stanza that perchance to dream, or whatever, like they know everything, like I just hate the overly educated, overly knowledgeable villain who can just bring up obscure facts and information, or they'll say something like, the Mediterranean black beetle is one of the most dangerous beetles in the history of the world, and they'll have like the beetle in their hand, they'll have it in their hand, and it's like, under the right circumstances, if you stimulate the head of the beetle, it will shrink into a ball and send out its tentacles to sharpen and inject its victim with poison that will paralyze them for 24 hours. Like, they just know these obscure facts. And I just like,
and they
why?
Know obscure bugs.
Right, and obscure bugs. And like, that is just so annoying. I'm like, why do you have to have these villains that are just so learned and so knowledgeable about everything? They just pull out this random information when they're, having these discussions, or, have the good guy tied to a chair in some room. And I'm like, that's just so overused and played. Like, I mean, I know, like, you're supposed to present a challenge for the protagonist where, they have to go up against a villain or antagonist who is on the surface, like, unbeatable. Like, I'm going to beat this guy, Right. You have to present a challenge to the protagonist. But it's like, but why is it always got to be like, guy is just... It can't be just he's just a normal guy who's kind of smart, or just, has these tools at his disposal. No, he has to be like the smartest guy in the world who knows about obscure Mediterranean black beetles. And to me, that's like overused and played, and I really hate seeing that. And that's something you always get, like, you always get in like spy movies and things like that, A
lot of that sounds very Bondish.
Right.
Bond film-ish. You always get that. Villains are, I mean, in this day and age, we are seeing a lot of repetitive things in movies and TV shows, and it's like, okay, y'all need to get some new villain tactics.
It all boils down to like writing. I mean, I just think,
for sure,
if you just do a better job of like, and that's what separates the good stuff from the bad. Where when we see certain shows, if you see something like, Game of Thrones, and you think about why Game of Thrones was so successful, and the way they wrote some of those characters, and you see like, wow, this is really, 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 really good. Like, this is, and then you see other shows that try to be like Game of Thrones and all these other shows, and it's like, this isn't as good. Like, why is that? Because they didn't take the same time and care in writing like some of these characters,
The last season withstanding, even though I didn't think it was terrible, like everybody likes to say. But, like, let's not forget the other several seasons that were just some of the best, like, writing.
I think people are doing the most talking about the last season being bad. Like, it didn't end the way you wanted it to. And, I can agree that some episodes or some character motivations weren't consistent. But any season that had those two episodes, the episode before the battle with the White Walkers.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual White Walker battle where like Arya was like sneaking around in the library and all that.
Yeah.
Those were like two of the best episodes of the series.
Like wow. I mean, just thinking back.
Right. So any season that has 2 episodes that good couldn't have been completely bad. Like, come on. Like, those are really, 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 really good episodes. And it's like, okay, the other ones may not have been as good, but man, if you talk about as a whole, I think those 2 episodes are so good that, like, it does overcome some of, like, the bad stuff.
The episode where they were just pretty much talking.
Yeah.
Like, all the dialogue. What was it, first 2 episodes or second?
The episode before the
battle. Okay,
before the battle. Like, the night before when they're all sitting around drinking.
I mean, you in a show like that, you didn't get much of that at all. It was always something happening. I mean, you got bits and pieces of talking, obviously, but like it was always because people were plotting someone's demise,
right?
Or some battle or whatever. But yeah.
But we digress.
But
that's essentially a bunch of stuff that grinds our gears.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed our vent session, and maybe you can tell us what grinds your gears.
Yeah, just reach out to us on Facebook, Just the Two of Us Podcast, or on Twitter, Just the Two of Us Podcast, and let us know, like, what do you agree? Do you agree with some of these, like, gear grinding situations in movies and television? Do you have any of your own? Please feel free to share them.
Yes.
And I'll put a bow on this one.
We did it, Joe.
We did it, Joe. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.